Something about old dogs and new tricks, and you know how it is. Anyway, we're glad everybody's here this morning, and we're turning and we're getting our study continuing this morning in 1 Peter chapter 3, and we're picking up at verse 7. We talked a lot about this in our workbook, picking up on page 67. We dealt with question 1 on that page and dealt quite a bit with some things relative to that relationship and the husband and the wife and that type of thing. We got down to question 2, and let's take a look at some things here with regard to verse 7 this morning, because it does deal with instructions to husbands. And take a look at and I wanted to put these 3 up here so we could get a picture for what the verse is saying this morning. King James Version talks about this. It says, "Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together with the grace of life, that your prayers not be hindered." The New American Standard Version helps a little bit in this in giving some thought. It says, "Husbands, in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers not be hindered." I don't use the New International Version very much, but I thought in this particular verse it was even more helpful. It says, "Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner, as an heir with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers." Now, with all 3 of those versions up there, I think we begin to see the picture that's really painted. It's not a big I and a little U. It's not about that at all. It's about the team. It's about the couple actually getting to heaven. And that's what the verse is trying to emphasize to us. And for us as husbands to be considerate, to understand the situation with our wives and treat them with respect. And we're going to talk about some of these thoughts here just in a moment, as a weaker partner. And I don't want us to understand that to mean anything less than what it's saying. How is a woman weaker than a man? Physically. And that's it. Physically, and that's it. Mentally, not the case. Emotionally, certainly not the case. Okay? And that's the only way that she's any way weaker than a man, and that's physically. And so we need to be considerate of those kinds of things relative to that. Now, as the verse continues, granting her honor in the last part of that verse, and that's where we pick up with question 2 this morning. What is the husband charged to give? Honor. What's that mean? What's honor all about?
Respect.
Okay. All right. Any other thought?
Appreciation.
Okay. Do we do that enough? I guarantee you we don't. I don't. Okay. Other thoughts?
10 to 11 here.
All right. The idea to value, esteem highly. High respect was for worth, merit, or rank. Now, when we have the thought we've got in mind here with that, in looking at trying to achieve the goal of both getting to heaven, this becomes part of where we go with this, and esteeming the value, highly esteeming the value and worth of her and what's going on. All right. We dwell with our wives according to knowledge. When we do that, we act intelligently toward them. Now that seems like that ought to be a given, but do we? Depending, if you think it's a question mark, ask her. I guarantee you might be surprised at the answer. Okay? You might be surprised at the answer. But dwelling intelligently with them, and as we said a moment ago, so though we understand she is physically weaker, she is an equal heir to the grace of life, which the Lord has promised to all those who live with Him, who live for Him. So when we put it in that context and understand that she's valuable. We're both valuable as far as God is concerned, and the goal is to get from this life to the next. It takes all the big I and little you out of it. And we're working then to get to heaven. Go ahead.
You know what? We're supposed to tell our wives we love them.
Okay.
And we must prove it to them.
Okay.
By the things we do and practice.
It's a good lesson.
If you want to keep a woman happy, tell her you love her. And be good to her and kind. Love her as you love your own self.
You're a man of wisdom. You're a man of wisdom. I appreciate it. Thank you. Great thoughts. Great thoughts.
Roger,
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing, because I know sometimes people might would disagree with you saying the only difference is physical strength, because sometimes women, I'm trying to be political here, sometimes they're a little more emotional maybe, sometimes, but that is not necessarily a sign of weakness. It's
No.
just a difference between men and women.
Well, exactly. And in what Ernest was just talking about a while ago, if we as men, and we talked about this last week, if we as men could understand that's an asset, not a liability.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's where we get in trouble. It's where I get in trouble. Okay? Those views from an emotional point of view are something that don't dawn on me. Okay? It don't hit me like it hits her.
They
And
would have more compassion than men too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what that brings to it is a complete picture to understand a situation, most situations, when you can take a look at the whole thing. And that's what it's all about. The goal, as we've said, is heaven, and working together to achieve that goal is what it's all about, and to get to that point. We talked about that question 3, and I think, Melvis, you started down that road a little bit. In what way is the wife a weaker vessel? And we talked about that from a physical point of view. There are pluses and minuses both sides. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's just one that becomes obvious that we can talk to this morning. But the two working together is what it's all about to serve the Lord. Now, question 4, in becoming children of God, is there any difference that the woman in the women and what the men do?
Yes.
Huh? Yes? How?
Become children.
Read the right line or we're all in trouble. Right, there's no difference. The same instructions are there. Galatians 3:26 and 27, 26 through 29. What did Paul say about the male and female becoming children of God? They're all the same. That's all right. That's exactly right. You're all the same. All in one in Christ Jesus, together with that. Okay, as children of God, what do husbands and wives share?
Grace of life.
All right, the grace of life, the things that are promised out there from God's word. Now let's take a look at number 6, because I thought that was an interesting question. What would cause prayers to be hindered?
Rendering evil for evil.
Okay. Ooh, good one.
Together,
I'm sorry?
not being errors together.
Okay, not being heirs together. Other thoughts?
And you're mad at your wife, all you're coming to church, you're collecting to yourself.
Okay. Okay.
Disobedience
Disobedience? In what way?
and not following the instructions that you've been given.
Okay. All right. Okay.
If your wife right, you're gonna be fighting and arguing. Things ain't going right.
Yeah. It's a tough, that makes for a hard situation. And all of that working together tells us what?
Work together.
Right. And we need to keep God in the loop. Now, which leads it to then the next part of that. Does this necessarily infer that husbands and wives pray?
Yes.
Now, let's talk about that a moment in that regard. The prayers that are offered, whose? Whose prayers? All of the above, wouldn't you say? And I think that's exactly right. So that those prayers are sent to the Lord in such a way, in an understanding way, that He answers them. And that can be tough. Is that an easy concept?
If we always put God first in our lives, it'll be okay.
Okay. Let me say the question again. Is it an easy concept? That's where I'm going. Why?
It's hard to put God first.
Particularly when?
Having history.
Okay. And that's what's difficult, because emotion gets in the way. Emotion gets involved. And it's hard. The prayers need to be there one way or two. But we lose sight of that, or I lose sight of that simply because maybe I'm angry. Simply because maybe I'm upset. And that's when we need to really be sharing things with God at that point. First of all, to help me keep my mouth shut, right? I mean, aren't we all in that boat? I mean, I'm not talking to the, we're all in that boat. Help me to keep my mouth shut. I hear something way back there on the back sewer. What was that? It was good. What did you say? I heard something from back there. Good. I like it. Thank you. But the idea is in prayers, sometimes we shut them off. We turn off prayer. And it's when we should be, as you said, on the most. We need all of the prayers all the time in any situation. And that's what we need to understand what's going on. Then finally, is if their relationship and marriage is strained by arguing, fighting, bitterness, etc., are they as apt to be praying? Let me share this one with you. I answered that yes, no. Because as Marge was going down that road a moment ago, when we understand the need for prayer, even when things aren't going well, we still need to be doing it.
We should be praying more at this moment to keep
Yeah.
from arguing and fighting, but that's the way you look at it.
Right. And so I can see the yes, and I can see a no. Because emotion gets in the way, and when it does that, we just forget. And
If you're losing the argument and the fighting, you need to be praying that you might win.
just give me a bigger stick, right? I see what you're talking about. Huh?
I said, what if he was wrong? Pray and win.
Yeah, not the right idea. Not the right idea. Not the right idea at all. Okay. All right. We've worked on questions of verse 7 quite a bit. Are there other thoughts or ideas? I mean, we've talked about a lot of things relative to that verse. Have we missed anything? Something that's coming to mind with you folks? I don't want to overlook a thing. Okay? Because verses 7 through 12, instructions to Christians, is a great section. It's a great section. What all have we talked about in chapters 2 and 3 relative to different kinds of relationships? We just talked about the husband and wife. That's chapter 3, first part. What else have we talked about in chapter 2? Relationship with who?
Servant, master,
Okay. Servant masters. Government. Okay. All right. Now, verse 8 kind of starts to take us in a more general direction relative to those relationships. Okay. And so we want to take a look at that a little bit as we pick up in verse 8 this morning. Let me again put some things up here so that you can just see the differences here a little bit. Verses 8 and 9, the King James Version again. Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one for another, love as brethren, be pitiful and courteous. Verse 9, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that ye are therefore called that you should inherit a blessing. It's King James Version, okay? Look at what the New American Standard has to say with this same verse. To sum it up, I like how that starts. To me, that just sets the stage. To sum it up, all of you, all of you, be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humbled in spirit, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead, for you were called for this very purpose, that you might inherit a blessing. The New American Standard. Those help us, I think, get a real clear picture of where Peter's trying to take us here with these verses. Question 1 in that section then, these charges are given to who? All of us. All of us. None of us are missed then in this regard. And then in question 2, it says there are 5 things that are charged in verse 8. What are they?
In one mind.
Okay, one mind. Compassion.
Love of brothers,
Okay.
Courteous,
Courteous.
in heart,
Oh, I'm sorry. Pitiful. Pity. All right. Those are the 5 things that are talked about in that verse. Now let's take a look at those just a little bit. To be of one mind is what?
united,
I'm sorry?
united
United how?
in the Lord, same goal.
In agreement.
Okay.
I think it's trying to understand what the other one is doing.
Okay.
There's your second verse.
All right. Let me help us a little bit. Okay. If you go back to chapter 2, and we get down to verse 21, when Peter's talking about here the relationships between us and the authority, and then a master-servant relationship and that type of thing, he then switches in the last part of that chapter and gives us an example. He picks up in verse 21 and says, "For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps." And he outlines some of the steps that Jesus used there in that passage. And I think Peter's trying to get us to focus a little bit on have the same kind of attitude. Have the same kind of thought. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10, he says, I plead with you, brother, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you speak the same thing, that there be no division among you, but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment. Christians are to be united, and that united is upon the fact of what God's Word teaches.
And-
Like Ephesians 4 tells us to endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of the thing that he's talking about here, that we are to be of one mind, and those the love and the compassion and the tenderness is in that. But the bottom line is that if we listen to God's Word, obey God's Word, that's the kind of person we be.
Okay, and that ties exactly together with what Peter's talking about here, because the example of all that was no better given to us than Jesus himself, and illustrating those points and getting to what Herb was talking about, in unity and following his example. Now, you and I look at that and we understand that he's on a level all by himself. None of us can ever equate to him in any way. But does that give us an excuse to quit trying? And I think that's a lot of times where we end up going. is I can't achieve that, I can't get to there, I ain't no point in me even trying. No, that's not the idea whatsoever, and that's where he's going with this, because in the idea of being of one mind, in all areas, as we've discussed in chapters 2 and 3, these instructions are kind of more generally applied to Christians in the various walks of life, because we all have different walks of life. Once we go out that door, your life is different from mine, mine's different from yours, but the same basic rules apply. Conduct yourself accordingly. Conduct yourself accordingly. To be of one mind, we are to be unified on matters that pertain to service of Christ and follow His example, including our treatment of others. Including our treatment of others. And in that regard, then, with that as the framework and that as the guideline, then it's more clear to us how to live our lives in the way God would have us. Any thoughts with that?
We can all improve.
I'm sorry?
I said we can all improve.
Oh, amen. Amen. We're all works in progress. And I don't know that we ever get there. You know, I don't know that we ever get there, but that's the direction, that's the goal that we're looking for. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay. The next thing it talks about in that verse is having compassion or sympathy. What's the idea? And first of all, are you just full of it already? You already got it? You don't know, you just can't handle it enough?
To somebody else's needs, that's what they might be willing to need.
How good are we? How good am I at that?
It's tough sometimes.
Yeah. Why?
You gotta put somebody before yourself.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
Yep. And that's not easy. Go ahead.
I think it also needs to understand when they're struggling, you know what I'm saying? Just because you're having good and feeling the love of God, you know what I mean? Just because you're super strong that week and they're having a rough week, you should have some compassion and be sympathetic and understand.
Well, that's a great thought. That's a great thought. What does that require? I mean, you're dead on right.
Love and faith.
Compassion.
How about some open eyes? How about some open eyes to see what's there and what needs to be done, and not necessarily not only seeing it, but then taking the seeing of it and using what you're talking about there and feeling that need and doing something with it. Now, ladies, most of the time you've got a good handle on that. Much better than we do. That's no excuse. I'm just saying most of the time that's the way it works. Now, guys, that doesn't give us an excuse. You see where I'm going with this? This is something we need to learn. Your point is, I love it, because that's exactly an area that we all need to be better at. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, you know, Peter sees this and he pretty much reinstates this in the second letter when you look at chapter 1, starting at verse 5 down to where he talks about virtue, and the virtue knowledge, the knowledge self-control, preservance, and the preservance godliness, and the godliness brotherly kindness, and brotherly kindness, brotherly kindness. And if these things be in you and abound, you'll neither be barren or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But then he says, those that like these have forgotten. And that's, that's the problem. Sometimes we just forget.
Yes. And again, we forget, no question. Sometimes I question if I ever knew. If I ever knew the depth of some of that. The little two-letter word in that phrase that you just read, if these things abound in you. That little word hangs an awful lot on it, and it helps us understand more of what we need to be striving for. the next one that he has in the list there, love as brethren or brotherly. What's your thought? I put that up there particularly because it's a direct quote. Love as brethren. What's that mean?
Love,
Hmm?
love is one thing that holds us together.
Okay.
If you have no love, you're separated. But love will bring you together. And
Okay.
we'll do God's will. That's His will, for that we love one another as He has loved us. And He gave His life for us.
Yes. Yes. And we talked about that last week in the giving of that life, the ultimate conclusion of what he did in showing his love for his disciples and his followers, up to and including the giving of his life. Great point. Great point. But what does the love of the brethren tend to stress?
Well, I think he's trying to stress to just how you love your brother in real life. I mean, your physical brother. The love that you have for them, you know, and we're bound by the blood of Christ. And our union should be very close. And so he said, look, your family member, your flesh is his flesh, bone of his bone. As we become children of God and we're heirs to that, we're all brothers in that. He says, you're to love as that family loves.
Well, that's exactly, that was my next point. And you said it in a different way, but the love one has for another because we are together in Christ. And that's the love that we share.
But you know, love, you have to love your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
That can become a problem in some cases. But we've got to love our enemy and do good unto all men.
Mm-hmm.
Then that shows what love will do. It will bring us together
Right?
and stop all confusion and hatred and all this and that stuff.
Can really put a damper on it. But as you said, in that particular case as you're talking about, that's not easy either. But it's something that's there to look at. Okay, the last one that was listed there was pitiful. And of course, the New American Standard talks about being kind-hearted and talks about it in that phrase. What's the idea? It's kind of saying the same, I think. But what do you think? Exactly. Going back up to that's exactly where I took it. Was going back up to having compassion, sympathy for, kind-hearted toward, being tender-hearted relative to those situations. And then finally, the last one that talks about there in that section was being courteous or humble in spirit. What's the idea?
Show respect to each other, show respect to one another.
Okay. Humble in spirit. Friendly or kind. That's the idea that's talked about there. And that when you take that entire package, I mean that verse doesn't take long to read that in verse 8. It doesn't take long to read that and put that all together, but boy does that cover a bunch of territory.
There's a lot of information there.
Yes, there is. A ton of information there. A ton of application there. I mean, we can read that and look at that and say, okay, yeah, that's cool. Apply it. And then find out how tough it is. Go ahead.
Does that humble in spirit, you think, mean to not be prideful, neither, like I've said before, like if you're having a good week and they're not having a good week?
Mm-hmm.
Do you kind of take that as not be prideful in spirit, or just, no?
I don't think pride works into it. I think it's the idea of understanding, as you and I were talking there a moment ago, seeing the situation, having compassion for the situation, and then trying to do something with it the best that you can do in helping with that situation. I don't think pride gets in the way of that, involved in that at all. Okay? All right. Other thoughts?
There's some times you know someone's doing something wrong, and instead of having pity for them, you don't You don't have any symptoms,
Right.
and when actually you probably should help them get out of what they're doing.
What do you think would complicate that?
Pride, I guess.
Can? Another idea?
Sometimes we say, they got their stuff there. They probably deserve it.
What if what they've done affects me?
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes,
What if what they've done affects me?
You're gonna get eaten.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
and sometimes we gotta realize that we're not always right.
But at that point, we feel we are.
Yeah.
We feel we are. And that's all that counts. At that moment, that's I'm right. Forget it. Okay? But you're right. I mean, all of that together can be a real complicated situation to sort through and figure out. Ernest's point relative to love, I think, is, and it is, we look at this and we see this, and that's why I wanted to spend some time on verse 8 this morning. Because we look at that and we see it, and it's, that's good reading, and that's how I should be, and that's how. Put it to use. See what these words are saying, and figure out how difficult it is. That's what I spent a lot of time looking at this week. Is how complicated this is to do, because life is not easy. I saw a thing on a show last night. Life is not easy. And if all of us go out the door and say, yeah, it's just a piece of cake, I don't know what planet you're on, but it's not this one. It's not this one. And so that's the things that I hope we can see a little bit through this morning. God's there. And that's where then the rest of this, or some more of this, goes to as we take a look at some more of these thoughts this morning. Because as he says here, then with those thoughts in mind and with the things that we've just talked about, in conjunction with that, he says then, and moving with that, what two things are we told not to do? Question 3.
Evil for evil.
Okay, what's that mean?
Try to pay something back.
Get even.
Okay, evil for evil is what? What's evil mean?
Wrong.
Wrong? Okay, what else?
Somebody thinks you crazy bad.
Oh, at least. At least. Maybe with a twist, right? Yeah. All right. Evil's the idea of harmful, ill, wicked. I mean, it's more than just, we can say the word, but there's a meaning there. Okay?
What evil separates us from God? We have no fellowship with Him.
Absolutely. And we're gonna go that direction with this just in a minute. Good thought. All right. It says don't be rendering evil for evil. What else? Oh boy, that's a common word. What's that mean?
Insult.
Okay? Insult for insult. Okay? The idea of not rendering evil for evil or insult for insult. Why?
One thing never does get you anywhere in an argument.
Trying to get you in deeper, right? Trying to get you in deeper. I'm there. Okay? But there's a more practical side of that also. Let's take a look at Hebrews chapter 10 with me just a minute. In the end of this, we'll pick up in verse probably 29. In chapter 10, it's talking about several things, but in this particular section, it's talking about Christ and the judgment, that type of thing. In verse 29, how much severer punishment do you think will reserve who have trampled underfoot the Son of God and have regarded as unclean the blood of his covenant, which which he was sanctified and has insulted the Spirit of grace. But verse 30, for we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay, and again the Lord will judge his people. It's a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Who's going to do the payback? If what? We let him? There's the part. There's the problem. There's the problem. God said, I'll take care of it. You just handle the situation and I'll do the rest. Okay? Vengeance is mine, he says, I will repay. The idea of not rendering evil for evil, railing for railing, that type of thing, with the view in mind, God will take care of it. As we've said on these other verses. Is that easy? How come?
Still flesh.
Huh?
Still flesh won't strike back.
Well, yeah. You want to extract your pound of flesh because they already did. Okay?
Call it reflex.
Yep.
If they make you hurt, you want them to hurt just as bad.
Say that again, Marge. Let me hear that again.
I said, if they make you hurt, you want them to hurt just as bad as you've been hurt,
Or worse.
or worse.
I'll just add that on there.
Yeah.
Okay? And I get that. I understand that. And in situations when you stand back and look at it, you feel like they should make you feel worse because of what you did. And I've been there, I know. Okay? But it doesn't negate the fact that in the struggle with all of that, how difficult it is to hold on to the Lord and hold on to what he says. And it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll say things you regret later.
Yeah,
And
we've all been there.
the conscience is kind of helps.
I'm sorry?
If you trust in the Lord, you'll always come ahead.
Boy, I wish you'd write down all these things you're telling us. You got some good stuff here this morning. This is great. But you're absolutely right. And I'm not trying to make light of it at all. It's dead on correct. And while we're sitting here talking about it and in a class situation, it's great but when we get out of here and we get off to ourselves and we get off to our own situations and we get off to what's going on, how hard is it to remember it? And that's where I think we all struggle with that. And that's where we're talking about prayer. We're talking about the help that we need from God in handling these situations. And they're all real. They are all real. Every one of us sitting here have these real things to deal with. So it applies to all of us. It applies to all of us. Me, everybody. It applies to all of us in understanding what we need to be thinking about relative to serving the Lord. And that's what it's about. I mean, we can look at this stuff and say, well, that's easy for somebody to do. It's not. It's not. And what we need to understand is we all struggle with it and we all need to be working toward that situation. Now,
It's easier to find pity or courtesy or sympathy when somebody's falling short of doing what they ought to be doing, as long as it's not affecting you like you said. But when it starts affecting you,
yep.
causing you problems, then it's harder to have that compassion and sympathy for you.
And it can go on, it can happen. When you think about it, in one of the relationships that we talked about here this morning in 1 Peter, particularly when those kinds of things happen within a husband and wife relationship. Because they go on and on and on, and can go on and on and on, and they can be,
Resurface a lot.
yeah, they can resurface a ton, okay? And that's not to say they shouldn't, okay? Because the hurt's there. The hurt's there. what gets in the way is me. What gets in the way is trying to be sympathetic to that, particularly if you know you caused the problem, okay? And to be understanding about it, and it's tough. It's trust me, it's hard. Go ahead.
But it means a lot to not keep bringing this up. I mean, if it's in the past, some things you need to leave and not keep bringing it up. Because each time you do it, it's going to get a little worse.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. But again, I go back to the severity of the issue can be huge, and when it is, I mean, your thought's right, but very difficult to do. Very difficult to
They
do.
can forgive you too, though, you know what I mean? It's not just your, that's why you both need to work it out.
Right. Right.
I mean, you think about it, and that a lot of times as far as it should go, when you open your mouth, it comes out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
You'll think of something you know in the past, it's best just to leave it unsaid. But when you bring it up, not argue.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
And it kind of opens it up for you to be ugly about it again, because you brought it up. You let the whole room know, I've got this back on my mind. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Now I'm gonna be ugly about it.
Yep. And all that can happen. All that can happen very easily. Very easily. Okay, one thing that I wanted to touch base on was question 4. I only got a couple of minutes. Instead of returning evil for evil, what should a Christian do?
Do good for evil.
Return good for evil.
Return good for evil. What's the word I'm looking for that it says there in that verse? Bless. All right, what's the idea with that?
You pray for their good well-being.
Do something good for them.
Okay? If you will, just a minute. Now, we were in Hebrews just a second ago. I wanted to read a passage to you that I thought was really good with it. Hebrews chapter 12, and I want to begin in verse 19. No, I'll back up to verse 18 because it's 18 through 21. For you have come to the mountain that you may touch and to the blazing fire and to the darkness and the gloom of the whirlwind and to the blast. Hold on. I've written down something wrong here. I'm sorry. I sure did. I wrote it down wrong. I'll have to refer to that one. I'll help Mark out with it Wednesday night. I'll get back and figure it out. So it's the wrong verse. I'll figure out what it is and we'll get back with that. But the idea is returning blessing for something that's not good. And so we'll deal with that. We'll pick up with question 4 on Wednesday night. Our time's up this morning. I appreciate so much all you guys' input today, and thank you for that, and we'll pick up with that on Wednesday night. Thanks.